The 40-hour work week was designed for factory workers in 1926. We're still using it for people who reply to emails for a living. Almost a century, and nobody thought to update the math. That alone should bother you. You already know something's off. You sit at your desk for 8 hours, and maybe 3 of those feel like actual work. The rest is meetings, emails, and trying to look busy. I caught myself rearranging browser tabs last Tuesday for 10 minutes and thought, this can't be normal. There's a century of history behind why we work this way, a mountain of research showing what it costs us, and actual proof that better alternatives exist. We're going to cover why the 40-hour work week is broken, who it hurts most, and what we can do about it. Think about your average workday. You show up around 9, sit down, open your laptop. Meeting at 10 that could have been a Slack message. Lunch at your desk while answering emails. By 2 p.m., you're staring at a spreadsheet, not really processing anything, with 3 more hours to go. So you just sit there. You reorganize some files. Check your inbox for the fourth time in an hour. Then at 5, you close your laptop and go home. Tomorrow, you'll do it again, 5 times a week, 50 weeks a year. Look, I'm not here to tell you to quit your job or burn down the system. I want you to consider something, though. What if the number of hours you're expected to work every week wasn't based on anything relevant to the work you actually do? Someone picked that number almost 100 years ago for a completely different kind of job, and the rest of us just went along with it because nobody thought to ask why. But that's exactly what happened. And the real number of productive hours you're putting in during that 8-hour day is going to ruin your afternoon. We'll get to that. First, we need to go back to where this whole thing started, because we didn't even come up with this number for the kind of work most of us do. That's the wildest part. Before the 40-hour work week existed, people worked a lot more, 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week in factories. Literal physical labor until your body almost gave up. Brutal doesn't really cover it. So when labor movements pushed for shorter hours and Henry Ford adopted the 40-hour week in 1926, it was genuinely progressive. A ceiling, not a target. Ford didn't do this out of generosity, though. He ran experiments. He tracked output on his factory floors, where workers were welding, lifting, assembling, doing repetitive physical tasks hour after hour. After 40 hours of that kind of labor, productivity dropped off a cliff. More mistakes, declining output. It was a calculation about the physical limits of the human body doing manual work. Then somehow we took that number, a number designed for people operating heavy machinery and standing on their feet for 10 hours, and we applied it to people sitting in climate-controlled offices, typing on laptops, attending video calls, as if replying to emails and welding steel drain you the same way. They don't. Knowledge work exhausts the brain on a completely different curve than physical labor exhausts the body. Cognitive fatigue follows different patterns, hits different thresholds, recovers on a different timeline. Researchers have documented this for decades, yet nobody updated the schedule. We just kept the number everyone agreed on a century ago, moved on, and inherited a work schedule from the factory floor. Does it even work on its own terms? Good question, and the answer is where things start to get uncomfortable. If you're at your desk for 8 hours a day, how much of that time is genuine, focused, productive work? Not checking email, not sitting in meetings, not reorganizing your desktop or scrolling Slack. Actual work where you're creating something, solving something, moving something forward. According to a Voucher Cloud survey of nearly 2,000 UK office workers, the answer is 2 hours and 53 minutes. Out of 8 hours, less than 3 doing anything meaningfully productive. That's the average slackers, top performers, everyone in between. It gets worse. 79% of workers admit they aren't productive throughout their full shift. 4 out of 5 people at your office are, at some point during the day, just performing the concept of work, present at their desks, typing something, producing nothing of actual value. I wish I could claim I'm above this. I'm not. I've spent 15 minutes rearranging desktop icons and called it organizing my workspace. Sat in meetings nodding along while mentally planning dinner. We all have. That's a shared experience, not a confession. And honestly, it's nobody's fault. When the system measures presence instead of output, people perform presence. Sitting at desks, looking engaged, attending meetings that didn't need them. filling hours that don't need filling, a kind of performance art. We're being somewhere for 8 hours, and the system says that counts. That 3 hour number is actually generous, though. It assumes you're only working 40 hours. Almost nobody is. The 40-hour work week is a label. What's happening looks nothing like it. Full-time workers in the US average 47 hours per week. 47. That number has held steady for over 14 years. No spike, no blip, just the sustained reality hiding behind a name that sounds reasonable. Half of full-time workers regularly exceed 40 hours. Overtime that never gets called overtime. No extra pay, no formal acknowledgement, just expected. Salaried workers get hit hardest, averaging 49 hours a week, 9 extra hours every single week, with no overtime cap, no legal protection, no compensation. Hourly workers at least have laws on their side. Salaried workers just absorb the extra time like it's part of the deal, because effectively it is. Meanwhile, 18% of workers put in 60 hours or more per week, 12-hour days, 5 days a week. A system failing the people inside it. But 58% of employees say they feel pressured to work beyond 40 hours, not choosing to. Pressured. There's a real difference between staying late because you're passionate and staying late because you'll be judged if you don't. Quick math. You're productive for about 3 hours in an 8-hour day, and you're actually working 49 hours a week. That's roughly 30 hours every week doing functionally nothing useful. Overworked and unproductive at the same time. You'd think that's the worst of it. Nope. So far, this has mostly been about waste. Wasted time, inflated hours, people performing work instead of doing it. That's bad enough. But the bigger problem is that long hours don't just waste time. They seem to wear people down. One study found mental health starts slipping at around 39 hours a week. And that's uncomfortably close to the standard we're all supposed to treat as normal. A 2017 study in social science and medicine looked at this across thousands of Australian workers. And for women, the drop showed up even sooner. That makes sense when you think about what a lot of workdays actually look like. For a lot of women, paid work is only one shift. There's still cooking, childcare, cleaning, and everything else waiting at home. So the job doesn't really end when the job ends. A lot of people aren't just stressed because work is hard. They're stressed by the structure of it. The hours, the rigidity, the feeling that your week is spoken for before it even begins. And when that keeps going month after month, it adds up. That's the part this system hides well. The damage isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just gradual. The bigger issue is that this schedule assumes everybody has the same life, same energy, same responsibilities at home, same ability to recover. That's obviously not true. For people carrying a second shift at home, especially women, a standard 40-hour week isn't just 40 hours. It's work, and then more work, that nobody counts. The system was never designed with them in mind. Rigid 40-hour schedules also disproportionately harm underrepresented minority employees' health outcomes. The data exists, it's clear, and it's rarely part of mainstream work culture conversations. Parents, particularly mothers, face a structural penalty that has nothing to do with talent or effort. The schedule doesn't adapt to your life. You're the one expected to adapt to it. If you're efficient, the reward usually isn't more freedom. It's more work. Finish early, and the system just finds something else to put in the gap. The 40-hour week has winners and losers, and the people it hurts most hold the least power to change it. Then the pandemic happened, and things were supposed to get better. So let's talk about this more. Remote work was supposed to fix things. No commute, no office surveillance, no sitting at a desk for 8 hours just because the schedule said so. Your couch, your kitchen table, wherever, freedom. Except what remote work actually delivered was the erasure of every boundary between work and life. About a third of workers now work at home on regular workdays, and many of them work more, not less. When work happens at home, it's a lot harder to feel off the clock. You answer one message at night, then another, and suddenly being available starts to feel like part of the job. The office version of looking busy became the remote version. Staying green on Slack, replying late, opening the laptop on Sunday just to get ahead. And once that becomes normal, the week stops having clean edges. Post-pandemic workloads swelled silently. Companies added tasks, added expectations, added meetings, without adjusting the hours or the headcount. The 40-hour week, already fictional, became completely unmeasurable. No clock in, no clock out, just an ambient hum of obligation that never fully turned off. The hours didn't jump, they crept. Even when we are productive, does the system actually reward that? Worth asking. I want to describe something you've probably experienced. You get better at your job, figure out shortcuts, build systems, find ways to do in 4 hours what used to take 8. You'd expect to be rewarded for that. Maybe some free time, a shorter day, a bonus, at least some recognition. What actually happens? You finish your work faster, and you get handed more work. Your calendar opens up, someone fills it. Your capacity shows, it gets assigned. A punishment loop. It comes from the core design flaw of time-based work. The metric is hours, not output. Someone who accomplishes their full workload in 6 hours and stays until 5 looks normal. Someone who accomplishes the same thing in 4 hours and leaves at 4 looks like they're slacking. Identical work, different perception. We reward visibility. Join our YouTube membership for exclusive perks like early access to scripts, input on future topics about productivity, and connect with a like-minded community that gets it. Click join below and let's build your easier, more intentional life together. The person who stays until 7 p.m. looks more dedicated than the person who finished at 4. Even if the 4 p.m. person did better work, made fewer mistakes, and still had enough mental energy to actually have an idea worth something. This connects straight back to Ford. He at least had a reason for 40 hours. Physical labor had measurable limits. We kept the number and threw out the logic. Cognitive work, measured with an industrial-era ruler. No wonder the measurements don't make sense. You saved 30 minutes by skipping a meeting? Congratulations, here's another meeting. Naming the paradox matters, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The system doesn't reward you for being fast. It exploits your speed. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, has anyone actually tried doing it differently? They have. Multiple countries, multiple industries, thousands of employees. The 4-day workweek has been tested with real companies, real workers, and real data. Not theorized, tested. The UK ran one of the largest trials in 2022, about 60 companies, thousands of employees. The results were hard to argue with. Productivity went up 22%, stress dropped 39%. Sick leave fell 62%. Burnout, the thing every company says they care about but never structurally addresses, dropped to 71% lower than rates in comparable 5-day workplaces. Those numbers held up across the board. In New Zealand, a company called Perpetual Guardian cut working hours from 37.5 to 30 per week. Full pay, no condition. Engagement rose, and work-life balance improved by 78%. They liked the results so much they made it permanent. Across 4-day trials globally, mental health scores improved from 2.95 to 3.32 on standardized measures. Anxiety dropped 13%, from 2.26 to 1.96. These are measurable shifts in psychological well-being, not marginal improvements in how people feel about Mondays. Participants reported a 78% increase in happiness. Not job satisfaction, happiness. There's a difference, and it matters. Now for the stat that might matter most. Most companies that ran these trials never went back. They saw the data, experienced the shift in culture and output, and stayed with the 4-day model. 45% of workers surveyed said they could accomplish their full workload in just 5 uninterrupted hours per day. For nearly half of workers, the 8-hour day is measurably too long. The 4-day workweek is evidence at this point, not an experiment. Happy employees are great, but does any of this actually show up on a balance sheet? The human results are compelling, but companies run on revenue, retention, and recruitment. What happened to those numbers? Companies that adopted 4-day weeks saw measurable retention gains. In tight labor markets, offering a 4-day week became a real competitive advantage. Talented people chose these companies over traditional alternatives, not because the pay was higher, but because the structure respected their time. UK trials confirmed it. Actual measurable output, not just hours logged, went up 22%. More done in less time. That's an optimization, not a sacrifice. 59% of US companies are now open to exploring 4-day workweek trials. 22% of employers already offer some version of it, up from 14% in 2022. Meaningful growth in just a couple of years, and 54% of HR professionals report receiving more employee inquiries about 4-day weeks than ever before. Workers are actively asking for this. The revenue insight that keeps coming out of these trials. When people have fewer hours, they protect their time. Meetings shrink, focus sharpens, filler evaporates. The busy work that consumed 5 hours a day loses its hiding place. When you stop paying people to sit around for 5 unproductive hours, the numbers work out just fine. Data's clear, results are in. So why hasn't everyone switched? Shorter weeks work, employees want them, and companies that try them overwhelmingly keep them. So what's the holdup? First fear, customer availability. 75% of companies that haven't adopted a 4-day week cite this as their primary concern. What if a client needs us on Friday? What if we lose a deal because no one picked up the phone? Sounds reasonable, except the companies that actually tried it found their customers largely didn't notice. Staggered schedules, async communication, clear response windows. The fear was bigger than the reality. Second fear, workload compression. 40% of leaders worry that squeezing 5 days into 4 will just create more intense, more stressful days. Honestly, this one is legitimate. A compressed 40-hour, 4-day week with 10-hour days isn't the same model as a true 32-hour, 4-day week. Implementation matters. The goal is fewer hours, period. Then, there are genuine industry constraints: manufacturing, healthcare, hospitality. You can't close a hospital on Fridays or shut down a restaurant for a third of the week. Some of that resistance is real, and nobody serious is arguing every job on earth should be 4 days. The argument is that the 40-hour, 5-day structure shouldn't be the unquestioned default for every type of work. Some jobs need different hours. The problem is pretending all jobs need the same hours. There's something deeper, too. 62% of businesses say they'd fear salary cuts if they shorten the week. Trial data says otherwise. Full pay maintained, money saved through efficiency gains, reduced turnover, lower sick leave. The math works, but the mindset hasn't caught up. We've measured value by hours for a century, and changing that measurement feels like redefining work itself. For a lot of leaders, that's genuinely terrifying. The resistance isn't really about logistics. It's about an assumption we haven't examined. And that assumption is simple. More hours means more value, longer presence means more output. An engaged worker putting in 32 hours outperforms a disengaged worker sitting there for 50. Hours aren't the variable. Focus is. What if we stopped measuring time at desks and started measuring what actually gets done? Did the project ship? Did the client get what they needed? Did the problems get solved? Did goals move forward? There's a framework called a results-only work environment, or ROE. Employees get evaluated purely on output. No required hours, no mandatory schedules. You're judged on what you deliver, not when you delivered it or how long you sat in a chair while doing it. Freedom over faces. Companies running this model report higher engagement and lower turnover. Think about how absurd the current system looks when you apply it elsewhere. Imagine judging a novelist by how many hours they sat at their desk instead of whether the book was any good, or paying a painter by the hour instead of by the painting. Time-based metrics measure the container and ignore what's inside. Leadership needs to shift here. Promote the person who solved the problem in 2 hours, not the one who took 8. We've been running a performance piece for decades. Maybe it's time to judge the actual work. Enough diagnosing, though. What can you actually do with this? You don't need your company to overhaul its entire culture tomorrow. Some of these you can start this week. Some need a conversation with your manager, and all of them have evidence behind them. First, shorten your meetings. Default to 30 minutes instead of 60 or 15 instead of 30. If it can't be said in 15 minutes, you probably need a document. You already knew that. Second, block focus time. Protect 2 to 3 hour chunks of your day where no meetings are scheduled and notifications stay off. Those 3 productive hours we talked about earlier, this is how you guard them. Third, go async. Not every conversation needs real-time participation. Slack threads, recorded video messages, shared documents, these end meeting marathons and give people back their deep work hours. Fourth, use AI tools for the admin grind. scheduling, email drafting, report summaries, data entry. That's 2 to 3 hours daily reclaimed from tasks that drain you without challenging you. Fifth, try no meeting days. Some companies run no meeting Wednesdays. Others block entire weeks periodically for deep focus. Productivity gains show up every time. Sixth, align work to energy. Not everyone peaks at 9 a.m. Research on chronotypes shows night owls outperform early birds when given the same hours on different schedules. And matching tasks to your natural energy cycles is engineering, not indulgence. Seventh, track your own output. Even if your company hasn't changed anything, start keeping a record of what you actually accomplish. Know your numbers because it builds the case. Finally, micro breaks. Research on ultradian rhythms suggests a break every 52 minutes matches natural energy cycles. Short, frequent recovery beats powering through every time. These are real, practical fixes. But there's a bigger question underneath all of this. All of this points to the same thing. We've been treating hours like they're the point, when really they're just a container. Once you look at it that way, 40 starts to feel less like a law of nature and more like an old habit. Imagine a world where work is measured by completion, where finishing at 2 p.m. means you're excellent at your job, where rest isn't something you earn after putting in your time, but something built into the structure. Because we know, with data, with trials, with evidence, that it makes the work better. I'm not entirely sure why it took us this long to test something so obvious. But here we are. Companies are already doing versions of this. Perpetual Guardian, the UK trial participants, the 15% of US firms running 32-hour weeks at full pay. The trend is small, but it's growing. Getting there requires giving up something deeply ingrained, the belief that suffering equals productivity, that if work doesn't feel hard and long, it doesn't count. That's a cultural wound, not a business principle. And we keep passing it down without examining it. We're still running on rules written for factory output in 1926 for work that barely exists anymore by a man who was optimizing for assembly lines. Maybe it's time to write new ones. You deserve a work life that was actually designed for the work you do. And honestly, the evidence says you'd be better at your job if you had one. Giving way to quiet, knowing warmth. And hey, if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button.